It is with great pleasure that I welcome Sharon Ann Lee.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's early. I'm also waving to Tina from Los Angeles. Hey, Tina. Anyway, okay, so let's start with my topic. So today, I want to talk about this topic, redesigning success. And so I've been talking about trends for a long time, and you know, trends are kind of hard to talk about because a lot of times it's conceptual, and I'm talking about these conceptual ideas, and I'm always trying to find ways to make those ideas concrete so kind of people can relate to them, because it's really hard to see ideas that are in the zeitgeist. Like when you're in it, it's always easy to see kind of after, but as it's happening, it's kind of difficult to see. So today I'm going to talk about this trend, design your own success, by first telling a story, and then also I've kind of tweaked it for you guys as a creative community to kind of road test this idea for yourself. So there's kind of a story section and like a how-to section. This is like kind of this simplest level of like more of the stuff you love and are good at, and less of the stuff you hate and suck at. I know that seems like kind of like a no-duh thing. But a lot of us know this, but we don't live it necessarily. And so it's kind of a good mantra to kind of, you know, remind yourself. Okay, so perceptions of success. So here's kind of, you know, I'm going to tell you my story of the kind of a lot of main themes that kind of informed my understanding of success. So in my 20s, coming out of college, you know, I grew up and was informed by Yo MTV Raps. I don't know if anybody else was. And MTV Cribs. And so, you know, a lot of my initial, you know, ideas of success were what I call my pimpin' ain't easy phase. While I'm rolling down the highway, you know, blaring Snoop. With my mind on my money and my money on my mind. So anyway, so you see, like these are, those of you who don't know, this is the Dawn magic wand. Gold is for, green is for the money and gold is for the honeys. That's his tagline. So my next kind of much bigger influence of what success was my Asian immigrant parents. And those of you who either have Asian parents or know them might relate to this. So, you know, they give up their own lives for their kids, and so there's obviously kind of a high expectation. And so for somebody like me, you're kind of living in two cultures at once. There's the cultural expectation of your immigrant parents, and then America, which is a whole other thing. So any self-respecting tiger mom wants her kid to go to Harvard, because that's just, that's the best, and that's where you're expected to go. So I'm going to tell you this formula is like really simple. Okay, so the other thing is what you're supposed to be when you're Asian is you're supposed to be a doctor, like that. So when I told my parents ultimately that I wasn't going to be a doctor, my dad said, well, what will you be? Not like interested in what I wanted to be, but like there's nothing else to be. Like what will happen to you? But my mom had a plan B just in case I wasn't going to be a doctor, and there was only one plan B, so I could either be a doctor or I could be Connie Chung. Because she was the only successful Asian female in popular culture at the time, and she was, you know, a respected journalist. And white people seemed to like her, so that was like, okay. And then the other thing I was supposed to do is also marry a doctor who was also preferably Korean, went to Harvard, and if he was the son of a minister, that was like real big bonus points for my parents. So just to let you know how, like a little foreshadowing into my future of how far afield I went from this. Not only did I not marry this guy, I married this guy. So I know, I showed him this, he's okay. Now I will say that he was getting ready to do like an air band competition where he was David Lee Roth, so this wasn't like his day wear. Okay. So, and the next kind of big idea of success was this kind of great, huge mythology of the American dream, right? So especially if you're an immigrant, and even if you're not, this kind of concept of the American dream is in our mythology ever since, we're little kids. And so what that is, kind of the greatest example of this is, right, Steve Jobs and Apple, the Edison of our time. So this kind of concept of success is you're an inventor, or you're an entrepreneur, or you make this amazing product, you change the world, all of which he's done. And then you're lauded, as a wunderkind in, the public, and then later on, if you're continuing to be successful like he is, you're essentially canonized, and this is kind of, you've made it. So that's kind of, what, those are like kind of the three main ideas of success. Even though I went kind of far afield of a lot of my parents' expectations, I, did my own little small attempt at the American dream in 1999. After working for companies, I stopped working for the man and started my own company with a business partner. It was called Look Look. And at the time, it was kind of the internet was happening and youth culture was happening and nobody was there to really kind of cover it in the right way. And when we thought of the idea, it was really about, how could people be citizen reporters reporting on their own culture, especially youth culture, where, the kind of immediacy and intimacy of what's happening in their lives, it was so much stronger when it was coming from this first-person narrative versus somebody from the outside kind of going in. So when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, God, how can every single one of these young kids be the Christian Amanpour of their neighborhood, like embedded, they're already embedded, and we're hearing first person. So at a certain point we had, as John said, like 40,000 plus citizen journalists. We built our own type of, Flickr photo tagging system because Flickr didn't exist. We built our own Facebooking kind of system because Facebook didn't exist. So we did this and we started in a little house here in Los Feliz and quickly grew and had enough success where we started our own arts magazine. And this was kind of our first big experiment in doing something we were passionate about that was a total experiment that was in our field of play, which I'll kind of get into a little bit later. And the reason we started this is because we were getting all of this photography and art and writing from our correspondence that was really amazing. Kind of what we already know when you're on Flickr and when you're on these kind of photo sites. So it predated that. We were kind of early to see what talent was out there. And there was really no publication to kind of capture that talent and produce it in this kind of high-end, really kind of beautiful way. So this became, for a lot of our artists, a portfolio piece for them. So for them to get into art school or get a job, and so we're really proud of that. So, and we had our own Time Magazine moment. And all of this is to tell you that I kind of like did a lot of stuff that was supposed to be, and if you do all these things, you will be happy. And a lot of it was great, and a lot of it was happy, but it started to kind of slip for me. And over the course of 10 years, at a certain point, I looked up and I was lost in dark woods, and I don't know how I got there. And so this kind of led me to try to figure out what's happening. Like, I'm doing everything right, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and how come it's kind of led me down this path and I'm lost? And so, I'm a researcher and I'm talking to people and I love ideas, and so I kind of took this on as a project, looking at it in kind of a broader cultural, context. So this is what I call my David Byrne moment, where I wake up, and for those of you who don't know, this is a Talking Heads song. Once in a lifetime. So where you wake up and it's like, how did I get here? This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. And so what I did was I kind of like decided I'm going to kind of really inspect this and figure it out and kind of dismantle it. And so the ideas that I'm going to present to you about this kind of redesigning success and the trend is the last 2 years of me kind of road testing a lot of these ideas. And so they're not just conceptual, they've actually been in practice. And so I encourage you guys to kind of maybe even try some too. I just like a recap of the 3 themes of success for me were Pimpin' Ain't Easy, Asian success, and Forbes magazine about the American mythology. Okay, so let's get to the trend. So this design your own success trend is really about creating a personal blueprint of success. And this is based on your own interests, values, and dreams. So there's this kind of conceptual idea of shift away from society's ideas, which is external, and driven by the personal, intuitive, internal. Part of this is we live now in a society where a lot of these institutions that gave us our ideas about how to be successful and happy have kind of disappointed us. So this is government, this is church, this is company, business. So we live in kind of a post-Watergate everything world where people look up and say, hey, but why should I listen to you? You're not holding up your end of the bargain or your moral imperative. So people are kind of turning inward for kind of intuitive intelligence. So I kind of broke this down into these how-to steps, and I'll repeat this. So this is kind of your 3 steps. So number 1, how to do this is to write a poetic vision of your life, and I'll get into more detail. But this is something that no one had ever told me to do. People had told me to have a business plan or a salary goal or what I should be able to buy at a certain age goal, but no one had ever told me that this was an important thing, and part of why I got lost was not having this. Know your numbers, and I'll talk about, there's a lot of numbers, but there's 3 main numbers that everyone should know, even creative people. And I know a lot of creative people are like, oh, I can't do numbers, it's not my thing. But if you don't know them, you'll kind of always be in prison. You don't have to know all the numbers, just these 3 numbers. And if you do, then you can fully freestyle, it'll set you free. And then live in the power zone, which I'll kind of explain. And that's about living in the most efficient part of your life so that you have free time to do other things that are important to you. So let's start with this poetic vision. So the poetic vision of your life is, it's not a practical vision, like I said. It doesn't start with I want, it starts with I have a dream. And everyone knows the greatest poetic vision speech that starts with I have a dream. And we should kind of think of our lives that way, not in kind of small ways, but in kind of a big way. And it's kind of based on these things: skills, what am I good at? Values, what do I believe? Interests, what am I passionate about? And then kind of joy and longing, which is what makes my heart flutter. And then once you kind of think about your life in those ideas, you kind of put it through a filter of shifting this from what's in it for me to how can I help. And when you do that, you create more meaning in the world. So, because it's not just all about you, it's about whatever it is that you're doing that makes you happy and gives you meaning can somehow also contribute to your community, to the world, to your family, something. Okay, so the second thing, know your numbers. This is the great Alec Baldwin in one of the greatest roles of all time, Gary Glenn Ross. Coffee is for closers. So know your numbers. Number 1, you must know your burn rate. This is a business term that most business people know, but sometimes creative people don't know. These are all your monthly costs and your annual costs. This is your rent, this is your phone bill, this is how much you spend on lattes. You have to know what your burn rate is. I think most people go through life never knowing what your burn rate is because you just don't want to look, and you kind of go like, oh, don't tell me that, I don't want to see that. We live in now this kind of quantified self world where there's an app for quantifying, every time you go to the bathroom, if you want to quantify that, there's an app for that. So you have to know that. That's one number that's critical. The second number is what's called your close rate. And it took me years to figure this out. I did not know this when I first started in my company. And this is a sales term. Salespeople know this, or biz dev people know this, is how many times are you closing a deal every time you pitch something? And if you're a freelancer, if you own a business, if you want to do something beyond your salary, you've got to know this number. And the reason is for planning. So let's say your close rate is 10%. So that means for every 10 proposals that you put out there, you're only closing one. Okay, so which is fine, you know that. So let's say you want to make $100,000 a year. That means that you have to have $1 million worth of proposals in the pipeline to make your $100,000. If you do not know your close rate, you have no idea how many proposals you need to have out there. But what's great to know is that let's say your close rate is 10%. Then you can start gaming the system. You could say, I'm going to jack my goal is to make my close rate 25%. And if you go from 10% to 25%, suddenly you only have to have $400,000 in the pipeline to make that same $100,000. So, we all know making proposals and pitching, it takes time and effort. And so if you get better at your close rate, you don't have to do as many proposals. So it's time efficiency. So that's important to know for planning, because otherwise you're kind of just going and going and going, and you never know what you're supposed to be making. And I know a lot of freelance people who are in perpetual fear that they'll never be employed again. So they're just saying yes to everything that comes through the door. And so they're just afraid all the time. And part of the fear is not knowing your numbers. So if you know your numbers, you can say no to the things that are either non-profitable or the client, and you don't get along, and you don't have to say yes to everything. What a novel concept. Nobody told me that. I was taught to say yes to everything. If the business walks through the door, you say yes. And then the third number is the P&L for each job, and that's the profit and loss. And that's for each job. And if you don't know this also, you have no idea how to plan for living in the power zone, which I'll get to. And it doesn't mean that you have to take every job for profit, but if you don't take it for profit, then you can choose the ones that you are either doing pro bono for something you care about, or something that you really love, but you're not just doing it for no profit because you don't have that information. So you can choose to say, this is the stuff I'm going to do for not-profit, and this is the stuff I'm going to do for profit, but you've got to know those numbers. So living in the power zone is really this 80-20 rule, or what's also called the Pareto principle. It was an Italian economist, that's who Pareto is. And it really is just this realization that 20% of your effort can yield 80% of the results. This seems like it's totally impossible, but even in my own business of having run it for 10 years, 80% of my revenue came from 20% of my clients year after year. And sometimes it was even more extreme, 15%, 10%. So that means there's a whole 80% of effort that's only yielding 20% of revenue, right? So if you just axe out the 80% that's only making 20%, suddenly you have all this time available to you. Like in total, it's 20% less money, but in terms of kind of quality of life, it suddenly gets boosted like crazy. You have all this kind of free time. So that's what that is, and learning to live here. So if you don't know those three numbers, it's hard to live here because you're just guessing. But if you know those three numbers, you could say, I know I should take these 3 types of jobs, and then that'll free me up to do whatever it is that I want to do. Okay, so I'm going to break this down into like how you can plan for meaning. It's a very simple XY grid. This X line is money. Over there, your ass is broke. Over here, you've got so much money, your money is coming out of your ass. Up there, work that feeds your true self and adds value to the world. And down here, work that makes you want to stab your eyeballs or your clients. We've all been there, don't lie. So I'm going to go into these quadrants of like where you want to be, but this is kind of, okay, next slide. Okay, so this lower left quadrant is hell. Okay, you're not making money, and the work, you want to kill yourself. And a lot of people stay here for some reason. They just do. They say they're miserable, they don't make a lot of money, they hate it, and they stay. And my advice to you is don't stay. I know, obvious, right? It's files from Captain Obvious. The reason why is that we like stasis as human beings. We are, if we're driven by fear and a scarcity mentality, we like to just stay put and we're afraid. But I mean, look at it, like it's not good. You know, it's not, whatever you do is gonna be better than this. So don't be afraid. You can always go back to this if you love it so much. Okay, next quadrant. So this side is a more devious kind of hell. This is the kind of work where you still want to stab your eyeballs and you're making money. And this like some people never leave this world because it's the world of Gollum. We wants it, we needs it. My precious, my precious. You know what I mean? Like it will turn you into that guy. And because the work isn't feeding your soul, it's just for the money. And we know now from over 10 years of happiness research that the money doesn't make us happy. Okay, so we didn't know that before. They told us the money would make us happy, and it doesn't. And now we have Harvard researchers to tell you the money doesn't make you happy. Okay, so obviously this is the quadrant we want to be in, where you're making money and you're doing work that's meaningful to you, and that is also somehow giving back to your community. And this seems like a pipe dream for a lot of people, but it is totally possible. You have to make an effort to move to this quadrant. It doesn't just happen. It's not just like a magic thing that happens. You have to make an effort to move from quadrant 4 to quadrant 2. Okay, and then which leads me to this part, which is critical. This is here, you know, over here, because you may not be making any money or very little money, but this is play, and it's a critical part of keeping quadrant 2 alive. So these are all of your personal projects, your wacky experiments, your thing that, you know, you think about in the middle of the night and go, God, it would be so awesome if I could do this. And nobody's going to pay me to do that, but I really love it and I want to do it. Do it, okay? And the reason why people don't do it is say, I don't have time, I'm so busy, I don't have any time. Well, we went through the living in the power zone, so if you edit out that 80% that only brings you 20%, suddenly you have all this time and you can do your personal projects. And by the way, these personal projects will feed your work that you get paid for and may also make money for you. That's not why you're doing it, but it all, you know, it's like when we play, we get inspiration for our other work. When we don't play, we start to kind of get, you know, uninspired and depressed. So having institutionalized play where you're saying, I must play, I have to play, play is critical to my life, and this is how it fits in, you know, makes it all more fun. Okay, so the grand overview looks like this, and so, you know, the upper quadrants are happiness and meaning, and the lower quadrants are depression and self-loathing. I don't know, like, where do you want to be? I want to be there. So again, this is kind of to give you some context. A lot of people think about these ideas, but they feel either isolated, alone, it's just me. I'm giving you a larger context. It's not just me, it's not just you. There's a lot of people kind of grappling with this conundrum of how do I do the work that inspires me and how do I reconcile that with the work that pays me? And it is worth your effort to try to merge those two ideas. Okay, next slide. So back to the steps. How do we get to there? Write a poetic vision, know your numbers, and try to live in the power zone. Try to edit that out. It's hard to do that. The first time I had to say no to a job that was going to pay me, it was really hard. I like immediately wanted to say yes again. No, I'll take that. I was just kidding. Because I was trained, like I told you, that to say yes to everything. But for a lot of reasons, I should have said no to that work. And ultimately, that was the leap I had to take. And I was so happy to do it, because if your time is taken up by jobs or projects that suck your soul, then you don't have any room in your life to add jobs that really inspire you and make you want to jump up and down because you're so happy, because there's no more real estate there. So you kind of have to think of it like that. Like, you just have to leave some real estate open for these kind of inspirations to come into your life. The other thing you could do for this whole project is add a game layer to it. So you don't have to think of this process as, oh my God, I have to write a poetic vision. It's very tiresome. No, make it into a fun game for yourself. Like I said, we have so many ways to monitor our progress these days. A lot of it is free. You can make this into a game. So I just kind of created this fake vision quest and put the World of Warcraft people in here. And part of what I learned from reading Jane McGonigal's great book, Reality is Broken, is you can add a game layer to everything to make it fun for yourself. And what's great about, what we love about games is that there are clear goals, and there's rules, and there's feedback, and that there's modifications, and at the end, if we work really hard, there's an epic win. And an epic win for you guys is if you can find your path to the second quadrant. That's an epic win, not in a game, but for life. So I just thought, this is a way to make it fun. It's like, make it a Vision Quest game. I want people to kind of participate and not feel like this is the kind of career development advice that you get, from your college dean or something. Like, this is really your project. And so I just wanted to close out today's talk with, a quote from Steve Jobs. This is the Stanford commencement speech. If you guys have not heard it, it's on YouTube. It's really great. It's very short. He said, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary." So I think he's kind of got to the heart of this, is that you already know, you already know what your destiny is. A lot of it is unlearning the things that block your way to it. It's not about not knowing, it's about having the courage to pursue it. Thank you. So I think we have a few minutes for Q&A. Yes, sir.
Hey, when you got to that dark spot of your life, you found yourself in the woods, not really having really lost your way. Has that happened? Have you been in that cycle more than once?
The question was, when I found myself lost in the woods, have I found myself there more than once? In my life, it's really only happened significantly once. There have been kind of smaller moments where there's definitely kind of two paths to choose from, and you kind of had to pick, but this is the first time where I felt I made all of these advancements and hit my goals and found myself totally lost in the woods, and I was not expecting that. So it was a way for me to kind of figure that out. And now that I've figured that out and worked a process out for myself, now that I can just kind of reuse it. It's a tool in my toolbox. And so if it happens again, I go back to my poetic vision, which took me a long time to write. So you guys, like, your poetic vision is personal. It only has to make sense to you. But it's kind of your North Star. It's always so you can look up and see it, so you know that you're going in the right direction. if you don't have that light, you never know where you're going. You can kind of wander off into tangents. And so now I have that, and so whatever I'm doing, if I have a question about a project or anything, I go back to that and say, does it jive with this? If it does, then awesome. If it doesn't, then maybe I have to not do that. Yes?
Will you inspire us with your poetic vision?
So, okay, I am prepared for this, just in case somebody was going to ask you. Okay, so let's go. So, so again, this is just for me. It could not make sense to any of you. So first of all, I just want to explain, this isn't my poetic vision. I'll get to it, but this is kind of my first step into it. So I am a person who for my entire life has bristled under any title, job title I have ever had. Even if it had VP in front of it, even if it had president or CEO or anything that was lofty, I absolutely hated it. It was a label that I could not connect with, that I didn't feel like was me. And so, you know, when this happened, I was in search of a title that I felt really good about, that kind of let me be free instead of put me into a box. And I was sitting with my husband one day when I was really kind of struggling with this, and I said, is there some word that I'm not thinking of where you're taking, you know, like I'm inspired by culture and I like collecting all that information, but I'm not just a researcher. I like to take that information and then create something new with it. Is there some word in science or some other field that does that, like a polymath, you know? So I was looking for some kind of technical term. And he just looked at me and he said, I think they just call that artist. And it never occurred to me, because I wasn't, first of all, in my Asian parent success manual, artist was not an option. It was doctor and Connie Chung. And so, and also, you know, when you've had a business, you get kind of labeled of like, oh, you're a business person, you're not creative or whatever. So I just felt like I never had any rights to it, but it was the first time when I thought of it, and I'm not thinking about it in the terms of like, oh, I want to paint and have a gallery show. No, I'm thinking about it in this broader term of suddenly I relaxed under it because I just felt free. It didn't tell me to be anything. It was just kind of this open door to kind of make whatever I wanted to make out of it. And for me, this is the definition of artist, is to animate the magic inherent in the world. The world already has magic in it. The role of an artist is to kind of galvanize it, to kind of, you know, rally it, and then, you know, to genuinely connect with people, stir a response, and leave them a bit transformed. And I was inspired by something that David Hockney said, and you know, as a painter, I really admire, and he just said at the end, you know, I'm just trying to connect. I'm just trying to connect with people. And so when I did this for myself, I just thought, oh, I can kind of relax under that, and it gives me complete freedom to do whatever I want. And so that was a pathway for me. And for me, a lot of my interest when I filled out my worksheet was I'm inspired by culture and people and all the kind of weird nuances of what people are doing with their lives. You know, I'm so interested and I love it. And also kind of for me, I am really kind of understand the world through metaphor. So for the metaphor for me was bioluminescence. So bioluminescence really is like animals who emit light. So the next slide, like jellyfish and fireflies. And what I learned is that from these kind of weird frontier science books that I was reading, is that we are also, humans are bioluminescent creatures. We don't show the light, but there's light inside of our bodies. They've measured it with like photon measurement tools. And so that was kind of this amazing leap in my metaphors, like, oh, I'm really drawn to bioluminescence for some weird reason. And for me, if my work can show the light inside of people, then that's kind of my poetic vision. So mine was to lead with my heart, imagine the impossible and believe it's possible, and reveal the light inside of us. which is like human bioluminescence. So like even today's talk, normally I would have done a trend presentation in kind of a different way, but I think if a trend idea or a conceptual idea can help someone kind of reveal their light, it's like I'm on track with my poetic vision, right? So I get to still do the stuff that I love and figure out a way to make it kind of have more meaning, kind of boost up the meaning, like adding like a protein scoop to your smoothie, you know, like you get a boost. So yeah, so that's it. So again, you know, it's kind of, for me, I hope it makes sense. Yes?
There's so much going on in the world nowadays, like how do you keep track of like the trends, like are there certain like tips you go to, like how do you keep track of like your focus going and all that stuff?
Right. So the question was, there's so much going on today, how do I keep track of trends? I want to first distinguish myself on the kind of trend person I am. I'm not the lady who's going to tell you about the latest leather top hat you should have. Okay, I don't like talk about like stuff so much of like you should have this handbag and these shoes. Like that's a different type of person. I kind of focus on the ideas that are important to us and have kind of a long percolation in the culture, you know, years. And some of them may be percolating in small communities for years and not in the mainstream. So my main thing that I do to keep abreast is I am in the field. Okay, so that is my number one thing. I am out there, I'm talking to people, I'm interviewing, I'm doing surveys, I'm in, you know, every type of methodology that I can use to get primary data and not secondary or tertiary data, which is, I also gather that stuff, but my number one way to get real information is talk to real people, because that I have found that that's the only way.
Your proactive vision is pretty broad.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find that balance between making it too broad and too specific? Because if it's too specific, your quadrants are good.
Right. So the question was, my poetic vision is pretty broad, so how do you make a decision about how specific or broad to make it? Again, this is your personal vision. It has to feel right with you. There's no boss to take this to ask if this is right. You have to go into your own intuition. For me, I wanted a broad field because I don't have, the narrowness really makes me feel constricted. I just need a broad vision that I can connect to, and under that, I want to be able to make all sorts of things. Some people may be very specific, so I'll give you an example of a really specific one. I met somebody out in the field who said, you know, my gift is that I can do a great makeover. I can make my friend look awesome, and I know that I'm not saving the world with this, but it's a skill that I have, and if I could help my friend kind of show her beauty in a way that she's not able to do herself, then I feel like I'm doing something. And that was great for her, and that's an awesome vision, you know, and that's a very specific vision. So it's really up to you. I have a worksheet for this. If you guys are interested, I'll leave a notepad and I'll be happy to email it to you. But again, you know, this is the kind of woozy part of it is this is you. It's all you. You have to check within yourself. So make something up, and then you field test it. You try it out, and then you modify it. You know, this is a beta project. This is not like you ship and that's it. You're constantly updating this, right? Until you refine it and you work on it in the long term.
You want to redeem your husband?
Oh yeah, I do want to redeem my husband because I showed that picture, and I just want to say this is what he actually looks like. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.